Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back to day 4 of the IELTS grammar. Today, we're going to be talking about gerunds and infinitives and the differences. Okay, so let's start with what is a gerund? Well, gerunds are nouns that are formed by adding ing onto a verb. So basically, we can change a verb to a noun by adding ing. Now, not always in all cases, but in general, that's the rule, right? For example, speak, right? Speak is like to speak, right? To speak. That's a verb. But if we put ing on the end, speaking, well, speaking is a noun, right? Speaking is a thing, right? And a noun is a person, place, or a thing. Okay, what about spend versus spending, right? Same kind of idea there, right? To spend, that's a verb. Spending is a noun, it's a thing that people do, right? Um, listen and listening, count, counting, read, reading, list goes on, right? And so that's what a gerund is, right? It's something that was originally a verb that's been changed into a noun by adding ing, right? So there we go, that's a gerund. Okay. So gerunds can be used in different ways. First of all, gerunds could be used as subjects. So for example, we could say listening is an important skill. Reading and speaking are important skills, right? We could replace reading and speaking with they. They are important skills. Or spending money wisely is an important skill, right? There you go. Awesome. So gerunds can also be used as direct objects, right? To answer the question of what with respect to our verb, right? Enjoy what? Like what, right? So in the first example, it says, I enjoy walking with my dogs. Well, there you go, right? Instead of saying, I walk with my dogs, we're saying that I enjoy walking with my dogs, right? Walking is a thing that I do with my dogs. We could also say, I like reading, right? So expressing that I like a certain activity, which is reading. Okay, gerunds can also be used as subject complements after to be. So, for example, a good way to improve your English is by watching television programs in English, right? So it's after the verb to be, right? Is to be, and we're talking about, you know, using it as a subject complement to complement our subject after to be. We could also say you can improve your health by going to the gym regularly, right? So we're complementing the subject, right? The subject being something we can do, right? We can improve our health by going to the gym regularly. Number 3, people can avoid slipping and falling at the pool by walking instead, right? Or walking instead of running, right? So again, we're doing the same thing here. We're complementing our subject, right? We're talking about people and what they can do to avoid slipping and falling at the pool, right? So that's another way that we can use gerunds. Okay, let's now talk about infinitives. So what's an infinitive? An infinitive is a verb in the form of to plus the verb, right? So pretty straightforward. To walk, to run, to play, to have, to be, to go, to do, to make, list goes on, right? There's hundreds of verbs that I could pull here. One key thing, though, with an infinitive that I think a lot of English language learners really like is that infinitive verbs don't take a tense, right? So we don't ever have to change an infinitive verb to match, and agree with a subject or with anything else. All we need to do is we need to make sure that our verb, if it's an infinitive verb, is just in its barest form, right? To have, to do, to be, and that's it, right? They're always in the normal form. So here's some example of infinitives as direct objects. I want to study in Canada. I need to get my fishing license because I would like to go fishing, right? And so these are times where we would use infinitives as direct objects. Here's some examples. We could also use infinitives as subjects. We could say, To get more involved in your school would be a good idea, or to find a job will benefit you. These sound kind of weird, but they are technically correct. But the reason they might sound weird to a native speaker is because although they're correct, gerund is much more commonly used in practice, right? So we could use a gerund instead and say, getting involved in your school would be a good idea, or finding a job will benefit you. So here we're replacing infinitives with gerunds, and that's more common. But that said, technically infinitives can be used as subjects. It's just not very common. It might sound kind of strange to a native speaker, even though it's technically correct, because we don't in practice do this very much, right? Okay. Infinitives can also be used to show progress. So for example, in order to complete my IELTS successfully, I have to study first, right? So we're talking about progress and what we are doing, right? And a step we're going to take to complete this test successfully, right? Or number two says, I decided to save money in order to buy a new computer, right? Okay, so there we go. All right, so the next one is where we have it is plus an adjective plus an infinitive, right? So we could say, for example, it is difficult to find a job, right? Difficult being an adjective, something to describe a noun, which is the job, right? Or something to describe, well, really in this case, the difficulty of finding a job rather than a difficult job, per se. Or we could say, it is wonderful to volunteer in your community. And same thing there, right? We have it is, and then we have our adjective, which is wonderful. Wonderful is describing something, right? Right? Wonderful could describe a wonderful thing, right? Right? It describes a noun. To volunteer in your community, right? So it is wonderful to blank, or it is excellent to blank. It is not good to blank, and so on, right? We can fill in those blanks however we like. But this is another way that we can use our infinitive, right? So there's many ways. Okay. Another way we can do it is we can use it and then some version of take, and then a noun or a noun phrase, and then an infinitive. So, for example, it takes a lot of money to buy a car, right? So, we used a certain form of take that is conjugated properly with it, so with a third person singular. And then a lot of money would be a noun phrase, right? Not a noun clause, because I don't see any verb here, but it would be a phrase involving nouns. This is the place of a noun, a lot of money. And then our infinitive, to buy, right? It takes a lot of money to buy, and then we have a car, right? Or it took me 2 hours to get from Toronto to London, right? Again, we have the same structure. It took, and then we have me 2 hours, right? It took me, and then 2 hours, right? It's telling us how long it took. To get is our infinitive from Toronto to London, which sounds about right, right? It takes about 2 hours to do that. By the way, London, Ontario, not London, England, to be clear. Okay, and then number three, it took a lot of patience for me to finish my degree or to finish my school program, right? So again, we have the it took, and then a lot of patience, right? We have a lot of patience is our noun phrase. And then we have to finish. So we do have an extra thing here, an extra for me. We're talking about me specifically, or whoever's reading this specifically, to finish my school program. All right, so there we go. Then we have, last but not least, we have adjective plus infinitive. So back to Axel and his messy room, we could use this to express a certain adjective, a certain way we felt. So, for example, I was surprised to see that Axel's mess was cleaned up, right? Because here we have our adjective of surprised, and then we have our infinitive, right? right? Because this is a surprising thing, right? We could describe a person as surprised, the surprised person. So therefore, it's an adjective, right? We're surprised, and then we have our infinitive to see. So there we go. Number two says, I was sad to learn that Mike had to clean it up for Axel. So there we go. This is another adjective of sad, right? We could describe a person as sad. So sad is an adjective. And then we have our infinitive, to learn, right, in its form here. So we can use an adjective plus an infinitive in these ways. And then number three says, Axel was happy to be free of consequences once again. So there we go. We have happy, which is what? That's an adjective. And then we have to be, which is our infinitive. And then the rest of our sentence. So we can put adjectives and infinitives together in this way in order to describe the feelings of people in these cases, right? So that's another way that we can use our infinitives, that we would use an infinitive over using a conjugated verb in, one of the tenses of past tense or present tense or future tense or any of the other tenses we might have. All right, well, that is it for today. Today we talked about gerunds and infinitives. And I want to also quickly touch on some key takeaways here of what I want you to take away from all of this. So I don't want you to memorize what's a gerund and what's an infinitive, but what I do want you to do for homework today, if you do want to keep working on this to improve, is to write out a few different examples of each, right? Try for each of these to come up with one or two of your own examples. So gerunds as subjects, direct objects, subject complements. Then same with infinitives. Go over infinitives as direct objects, subjects, showing progress. This one with the it is adjective infinitive. This one with the it, some version of take, a noun phrase, and in infinitive. And then also, last but not least, adjective with infinitive, right? Go over all of those again. Try to come up with your own examples if you didn't as you were going along, is my best suggestion here for this one. And then when you go into the writing module, when you start doing your writing, then make sure that you are using gerunds and infinitives correctly. With these ones, you don't have to go out of your way to use gerunds or use infinitives, but do make sure that when you're coming across sentences or things you need to say that are going to involve them, make sure you understand how to involve them, right? And so I hope this was a good reminder for these different things. I'm guessing a lot of people have already seen this before. This is probably nothing completely new, but if it is something new or if it is something you're less familiar with, definitely go over it, and make sure, because this is more about getting the grammar correct, right? There's two elements of IELTS grammar. Number one is getting the grammar correct, and number two is using not just simple sentences the whole time, actually using different sentence types to make the writing more interesting and more cohesive, right? Those are our two goals, and this one has to do with making sure we're using gerunds and infinitives properly, right? So this is all about how can we use gerunds and infinitives in a proper way rather than just randomly sticking them anywhere, right? We don't want to randomly stick them anywhere. If we're using gerunds and infinitives, which absolutely it's a tool we want to have in our toolbox, then we should really make sure that we're doing it properly, right? That they are used in a proper manner so we don't lose points. All right, but that is it for today. Good work today, everyone, and I will see everyone next day. There's one more lesson in this series, and yeah, that'll be it for grammar. So we're in the home stretch. We're very, very close here, and that's great. Well, good work today, everyone, and I will see you then. Bye, everyone.